I was sitting in the pickup line outside Little Pines preschool when my husband told me his family had already celebrated Christmas without me. Without me, I could have handled. Without our 4-year-old daughter was something else. It was December 23rd, cold enough that the edges of the parking lot still had dirty snow piled against the curbs. I had just gotten Ellie buckled into the back seat of my Subaru when she held up a construction paper card covered in green crayon gold stars, and enough glitter to qualify as a workplace hazard. "Mommy, don't bend it." "I'm not bending it. You're holding it bendy." I didn't realize that was a technical term. She gave me the patient look only a 4-year-old can give a grown woman who clearly knows nothing. The card was for my mother-in-law, Carol. Ellie had spent most of the afternoon making it at preschool. Inside, she'd drawn herself holding hands with Grandma under something that was apparently a Christmas tree, although it looked more like a green tornado. We were supposed to go to Carol's house the next afternoon. At least that was what I thought. I started the car but left it in park. Then I called my husband Mark through the Bluetooth. He answered on the 4th ring. "Hey." There was noise behind him, people talking, a television, dishes clinking. I said, "What time should we come over tomorrow?" Nothing. I waited. Mark, from the back seat. Ellie leaned forward as far as her car seat straps allowed. "Ask Daddy if Grandma will like my card." I smiled at her in the mirror. You heard her. Still nothing. For half a second I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard Carol's voice in the background. "Oh, give me the phone." A few seconds later, she came on cheerful as a woman calling to confirm a hair appointment. "Dana, honey." "Hi, Carol." "What time tomorrow?" There was a tiny pause. Then she said, "Oh. We did Christmas yesterday." I actually laughed. Not because I looked through the windshield at a minivan pulling out of the preschool lot. Everybody. Well, Tyler was here. Renee came. My sister came over. The cousins stopped by after dinner. Renee was Mark's ex-wife. Tyler was his 29-year-old son. I was still processing the fact that Renee had apparently been at my mother-in-law's Christmas while I had been at home wrapping gifts for the same family. I said, "And nobody thought Ellie might want Christmas with her grandmother." Carol's tone changed. "Not much. Just enough." "Oh, Dana, don't make this into something." That phrase. I had heard some version of it for 11 years. "Don't make it this awkward. Don't take it personally. Don't start something." Apparently, I possessed the rare ability to create tension simply by noticing when somebody treated me badly. Put Mark back on. I heard movement. Then his voice. "Dana. What happened?" "Nothing happened. You had Christmas without your wife and your daughter." "Mom changed the date." When he hesitated. "That's not the point." I stared at the steering wheel. "Actually, I think it's pretty close to the point." Behind me, Ellie was quietly opening and closing her card. Mark sighed. "Look, Mom wanted one peaceful Christmas. Renee was coming because Tyler was there and everybody was getting along, so Ellie and I were the threat to peace." "Dana." "No, I'm asking. You know how things get. How do things get?" He didn't answer. "Give me one example." Another silence. Then he snapped. "Everybody had a better time without all the tension." I felt my hand tighten around the phone. "What tension, Mark?" He gave a tired little laugh like I was proving his case by asking questions. Finally, he said, "It was better without you two there." That did it. Not screaming, not crying. Something quieter. I looked out at the bare trees beyond the preschool playground and said, "Good to know." Mark started, "Dana, don't." One question. "What did you tell your mother? I'm the one signing her refinance on Thursday." The background noise disappeared. I could still hear the television, but the voices were gone. Then Carol came back on. Her tone had changed completely. "Now, Dana, that has nothing to do with Christmas." I almost admired the speed. 20 seconds earlier, I was too troublesome to invite over. Now we were discussing financial boundaries. Carol was 72 and lived in a ranch house in Worthington that she and Mark's father had bought in the late 80s. After he died 3 years earlier, she'd struggled with the mortgage, some credit card debt, and a roof that needed replacing. Mark couldn't help her qualify for a refinance. His credit had taken a beating after his landscaping business failed. Mine hadn't. I had worked in commercial insurance for more than 20 years, and several months earlier, I had agreed reluctantly to help Carol refinance about $87,000. The final signing was scheduled for December 26th. Nothing had been signed yet. I said, "Carol, you just told me I wasn't part of Christmas." "That is not what I said. You celebrated with the whole family yesterday." She didn't answer. "And now you need my signature Thursday. Don't mix money into family." That one nearly made me laugh. "Carol, you're asking family to borrow money with you." Mark cut in. "Dana, stop. We'll talk when I get home." I looked at Ellie. She was staring down at the card in her lap. "No," I said. "We'll talk when you get home." Then I hung up. For about 30 seconds I felt wonderful. Then Ellie asked, "Should I throw Grandma's card away?" And just like that, because you love Grandma, that part belongs to you. What somebody else does doesn't change why you made it. Ellie thought about that. Then she nodded. When we got home, she carried the card inside and stuck it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a slice of pizza. "She can have it later," she said. Okay. That night after I put Ellie to bed, I made myself a cup of coffee and opened Facebook. Carol had posted 17 pictures. Mark was there, Tyler was there, Renee was there. Everybody was smiling around the tree. The caption said, "Finally had the whole family together again." I stared at those words longer than I should have. Then I noticed Mark's sweater, dark blue, half zip, the exact one I had bought him 2 weeks earlier and hidden in the hall closet because I planned to give it to him Christmas morning. He had found it. He had worn my Christmas present to the Christmas celebration I wasn't invited to. That was when I stopped wondering whether this had been a misunderstanding. Mark came home a little after 9 that night. I heard the garage door first, then the side door from the mudroom. He stood there for a second with his keys in one hand and that same dark blue sweater on, the one I had bought him. I looked at it. He noticed. "Oh, come on," he said. That was his opening. Not "I'm sorry," not "I should have told you." Just irritation because I had noticed one more thing he didn't want to explain. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee gone cold beside me. "Why didn't anyone tell me Christmas had been moved?" He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door. "Tyler had work stuff. Mom was trying to get everybody together. Tyler told us 2 weeks ago he was off through the 26th. Mark stopped. Just for a second. Then he pulled out the chair across from me. "Fine. Renee was coming because Tyler wanted her there. That still doesn't answer my question." "What question?" "Mark, Renee and I have been in the same room plenty of times. That's different." How he leaned back. "You get tense." I waited. That was something I had learned over the years. If someone throws out a vague accusation, sometimes the best thing you can do is make them explain it. "How do I get tense?" He frowned. "You know." "No, I don't." "Give me one example." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I waited. Finally he said, "You make everything uncomfortable." Again. "Example. Dana, I'm not doing this. That's convenient." He pushed his chair back a few inches. Then he said, "Mom wanted one Christmas where everybody could relax." I looked at him. "And Ellie." That was the part he still had no answer for. He stared at the table. I said, "You were angry with me. Fine. Explain why your 4-year-old daughter had to stay home." He looked up. "You would have made a big deal about Renee being there. So you punished Ellie in advance for something I didn't even do. I didn't punish anybody. She spent the afternoon making your mother a Christmas card." He looked away. For a moment I thought maybe I had finally reached him. Then he said, "You had no right to bring up Mom's refinance on speakerphone." There it was. I sat back. "That's what you're upset about." "You embarrassed me." "In front of who?" "My family, your family who had just explained they were happier without me and your daughter." He shook his head. "You always do this. Do what turn everything into money." That caught me off guard. I stared at him. He kept going. You always have to remind everybody that you're the one with the steady paycheck. You're the responsible one. You're the one with the good credit." I said I didn't bring up my credit until your mother told me I didn't belong at Christmas. I said I actually want to hear this. Is that what bothers you? That I earn more now?" His jaw tightened. "I never said that. You didn't have to. That landed." Mark's landscaping company had failed about 5 years earlier. Not because he was lazy. He wasn't. He worked harder than most people I knew. But 2 bad winters, a damaged truck, and 1 commercial client who filed bankruptcy had pushed the whole thing over. After that, he bounced between jobs, property maintenance, sales, a short stretch managing crews for another landscaping company. He always worked, but he never fully recovered from losing the business. And I had never fully understood how much that bothered him. Looking back, there had been little signs. If a waiter put the dinner check between us and I reached for my card, Mark would joke too loudly about me being the CFO. If Carol needed money for a furnace repair or a tax bill, she always called Mark first. Then Mark came to me. Once at a family dinner, Carol had said, "Good thing somebody in that house knows how to bring home a steady paycheck." Everybody laughed. Mark had too. But I remembered his face. I had filed that moment away under things mature wives pretend not to notice. Now it was sitting right in front of me. I said, "Did you exclude me from Christmas because you're embarrassed that I make more money than you?" He looked offended. "That is ridiculous. Then tell me why." He didn't. Instead, he said, "You're not backing out of Mom's refinance. It wasn't a question." I felt something in me harden. "I haven't decided anything. You already agreed. I agreed to help with the roof and the debt we discussed. She's counting on you. And I was counting on my husband not celebrating Christmas behind my back." He pointed at me. "There, that's vindictive." Maybe he was right. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. After Mark plugged in because old habits die hard. I kept thinking about Carol's roof. I had seen the water stain in her hallway. I knew the shingles were bad. She was 72 and living alone. Was I really going to refuse to help an elderly widow because I had been excluded from Christmas? That sounded ugly when I put it that way. I didn't want to become the kind of person who used money to punish people. Around 11, my phone buzzed. It was Tyler, Mark's son. His message said, "I'm sorry about yesterday. I thought you decided not to come." I read it twice. Then I typed, "Who told you that?" The answer came less than a minute later. "Dad." Then another message. "He said you wouldn't come if Mom was there." I called Tyler immediately. He answered, sounding uncomfortable. "Hey, Dana, tell me exactly what your father said." There was a pause. "He said Renee was coming and you told him you didn't want to be around her." "I never said that. I know that now." "What else?" Tyler sighed. "He told everyone not to call you about it. Said you'd made your choice and he didn't want people turning it into a whole thing." I closed my eyes. That explained the silence. Nobody had forgotten to tell me. They had been specifically told not to. I asked, "Did anyone ask about Ellie Mom did?" He meant Renee. "What did Mark say?" Another pause. "He said you thought Ellie was too young to care." For the first time all night, I felt truly cold. Mark had not just left us out. He had made me responsible for leaving my own daughter out. Tyler kept talking, and Dana, yes, Christmas wasn't moved at the last minute. I looked toward the stairs. "What do you mean?" "Dad asked me over a week ago to keep December 22nd open." I didn't say anything. Tyler lowered his voice. "He planned it. I barely slept that night." During the night, and for some reason I stood there staring at it like it was an important problem. That's what your mind does when the real problem is too big. It picks a hook on the floor. I kept hearing Tyler's voice. He planned it, not forgot, not panicked, planned. And still by 7 o'clock I was trying to talk myself down. Maybe Mark had been stupid, maybe weak. Maybe he wanted to keep his mother happy and avoid an awkward evening with Renee and me in the same room. None of those explanations made him innocent, but they made him human. And if I was being fair, Carol really did need a new roof. I had seen the stain in her hallway ceiling. I had stood in her kitchen while rain ticked into a bucket near the back door. I didn't want to turn into somebody who said, "Fine, enjoy your mold because you hurt my feelings." So I told myself something I wanted badly to believe. I can be angry and still keep my word. That lasted until 8:17 a.m. I called the credit union. The loan officer, a woman named Denise, answered after 2 transfers. I said, "Hi, this is Dana Mercer. I'm supposed to be part of a refinance closing on the 26th for Carol Mercer." "Yes, ma'am. I'd like the final loan package emailed to me." A pause. "You haven't received it." No, another pause. That was the first moment I got uneasy. She said, "I can send that over right now." A few minutes later, the PDF landed in my inbox. I opened it at the kitchen table. Coffee on my left, reading glasses on my nose, Christmas lights blinking in the window. Very festive setting for discovering you had no idea what you were agreeing to. I went straight to the loan summary. Then I stopped. The amount was not $87,000. It was $142,000. I read it again. $142,000. I actually said out loud, "What the hell?" quietly because Ellie was upstairs. I scrolled back. Then forward. Why is your mother borrowing $142,000? That woke him up. "What are you talking about? The refinance. It includes the roof." "I know what it includes. I'm asking why the total is $55,000 more than what we discussed." He was quiet. Then he said, "There's debt consolidation. How much I don't know off the top of my head. You're the one who's been handling this." "Dana, it's Christmas Eve." "Yes, Mark. Numbers still work on holidays." He exhaled hard. "You're looking for reasons to blow this up." "No, I'm looking at a document with my name on it." That shut him up for a second. I kept reading while we were on the phone. Mortgage balance, credit cards, roof work, fees. Then one line stopped me. Cash out to borrower. Around $28,000. I said, "What is the $28,000 for what $28,000? The cash out." Another pause. That one was longer. I said, "Mark." She wanted a cushion. A $28,000 cushion. She's 72. She needs reserves. Then why didn't anyone tell me? I thought we did. We did not. You forget things when you're stressed. I sat back in my chair. That sentence was almost impressive. Not because it was clever, because of the confidence. I said, "Do not tell me I forgot agreeing to borrow an extra $28,000 for your mother." "I'm not saying that. You just did." He changed direction. "Look, Mom's counting on this. We can go through the paperwork Thursday. We're going through it now. I have to go." "Of course you do." He hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment. Then I went back through the application. My salary was there. My employer, our joint tax information, a rough value of our retirement accounts. Nothing looked forged. That mattered. Mark had access to plenty of it. This wasn't some crime thriller where my husband had stolen my identity. It was actually worse in a quieter way. He had kept the process moving while letting me believe we were talking about one loan. He was talking about another. By 10, I called a lawyer. A woman I worked with had recommended Linda Carver after her divorce, so I left a message expecting to hear back after Christmas. Linda called me 20 minutes later. "I'm technically in my kitchen making pie," she said, "so if you hear a mixer, that's why." I almost laughed. I gave her the short version. Christmas. The lie. The refinance. The amount. The cash out. She didn't react dramatically. That helped. She just asked practical questions. "Have you signed the final note?" "No." "Anything authorizing disbursement?" "No." "Have you moved money out of joint accounts?" "No good. Don't." She told me not to empty accounts, not to hide assets, not to change locks, and not to send angry texts I'd regret later. Then she said, "And don't sign debt you don't understand, because you feel guilty." I rubbed my forehead. "I'm worried it'll look vindictive." Linda was quiet for half a second. Then she said, "Declining to borrow $142,000 for someone else is not revenge. It's a financial decision." I wrote that down. Not because it was profound, because I needed somebody outside the family to say it plainly. That afternoon, Ellie and I made grilled cheese and Campbell's tomato soup for Christmas Eve lunch. I had planned ham potatoes, green beans, the whole thing. I couldn't face any of it. Ellie dipped her sandwich in the soup and asked, "Will Santa still know where we are?" I said, "Santa has GPS now." "He's fine." She nodded like that made perfect sense. For a little while things felt normal. Then, at about she keeps everything in piles. I did. Carol considered a filing system an attack on personal freedom. Tyler continued, There's an email printed out from a real estate agent in Naples. I said nothing. Florida, he added. I know where Naples is. Right, sorry. What does the email say? He hesitated. I'm going to send you a picture. A few seconds later it came through. I opened it. Small seasonal condo, reservation deposit, $28,000. I stared at the number. Then I looked back at the loan paperwork on my table. Cash out roughly $28,000. I didn't need a calculator. At the bottom of the printed email was Carol's handwriting. 3 words and a name. Mark says Dana will sign after Christmas. I read it twice, then a third time. The side door opened. Mark walked into the kitchen carrying a paper bag from his mother's house. He stopped when he saw me sitting there. I turned the phone around so he could see the email. Then I said very calmly, Merry Christmas, Mark. Tell me about Naples. Mark stood just inside this kitchen with a paper bag in his hand. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he set the bag on the counter. Tyler sent you that? I almost smiled. Not because anything was funny, because somehow with a $142,000 loan on the table and a Florida condo hiding inside it, his first concern was still who had told me. Tyler isn't the problem. He had no business going through Mom's papers. He was helping her organize them. That doesn't mean he gets to photograph private documents. I turned my phone face down. Okay, let's pretend Tyler committed the great Christmas Eve filing cabinet crime. Now tell me about Naples. Mark pulled out a chair but didn't sit. It's not what you think. I think your mother planned to use $28,000. That is your defense, I'm explaining. Please do. He finally sat. Mom has always wanted to spend part of the winter somewhere warm. Dad talked about it for years. They never got to do it. So she's 72, Dana. I know how old she is. She deserves something nice. I agree. That surprised him. I continued. She deserves a roof that doesn't leak. She deserves a safe house. She deserves to enjoy her retirement. What she doesn't deserve is the right to quietly borrow money using my income and credit because she wants January in Naples. You make it sound like she's stealing. Then why didn't anyone tell me he looked away? I waited. Finally, he said, because you would have said, no, there it was. No complicated explanation, no misunderstanding, just the truth. Exactly. He rubbed both hands over his face. I was going to explain it. When after Christmas. I laughed once. Apparently a lot was scheduled for after Christmas. My invitation, the loan details, Florida. Can you stop making jokes for 5 minutes? No. They're keeping me from throwing a coffee mug. That actually silenced him. Then he said something I didn't expect. You have no idea what this has been like for me. I leaned back. What been like this? He gestured around our kitchen. For a second, I genuinely didn't understand. Then he said, every time Mom needs something, she calls me. Every time something breaks, she calls me. And what do I have to do? Come ask you. His voice had changed. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something older. You pay more of the mortgage. You've got the retirement account. You've got the good credit. Everybody knows it. I thought about Carol's joke at dinner. Good thing somebody in that house knows how to bring home a steady paycheck. I didn't. He looked exhausted. When the company went under, everybody looked at me differently. I didn't. Yes, you did. I started to argue, then stopped. Maybe sometimes I had, not with contempt. But I had taken over things. Bills, insurance, taxes, bigger household decisions. Some of it was necessary. Some of it probably made him feel like a passenger in his own life. I could understand that. What I could not understand was what he had done with the feeling. Mark stared at the table. For one night, I wanted to sit with my family and not feel like Dana Mercer's husband. That one hurt. I kept my voice level. Who did you want to be? He didn't answer. So I did. Renee's husband. No too slow. I looked away. It wasn't about Renee. Then why was she there and I wasn't? Because Mom wanted Tyler to have both his parents there. Tyler is 29, Mark. He can survive Christmas without a custody arrangement. He almost smiled. Almost. Then I asked the question I had been waiting to ask. Fine. You were angry with me. You were embarrassed. You wanted to feel like the old Mark for one night. Explain, Ellie. His expression changed. Dana. No, explain why your daughter had to miss Christmas with her grandmother. He looked toward the hallway. Mom thought bringing Ellie without you would raise questions. I stared at him. So it was simpler. There are sentences you hear in a marriage that you know you'll remember 20 years later. That was one of mine. Simpler. That's not what I meant. You left your 4-year-old out because including her would make your lie harder to explain. I didn't think of it like that. I know, and that was the problem. He hadn't thought about it enough. My phone rang. Renee. I nearly ignored told me. I walked into the living room. I'm guessing everybody knows everything now. Not everything. Enough. She sounded genuinely embarrassed. Dana Mark told me you refused to come if I was there. If I'd known you and Ellie were deliberately excluded, I wouldn't have gone. I believed her. Renee and I had never been friends, but we had managed 11 years without throwing wine at each other. By family standards, that was practically diplomacy. And the picture, I asked. She groaned. Carol moved 3 chairs. I laughed before I could stop myself. Renee laughed too. I did not choose to sit next to your husband. Good, because I was starting to think 11 years of divorce had gone very badly. When we hung, I realized how much energy Carol had spent over the years keeping Renee and me just suspicious enough of each other. It had worked, until it didn't. Carol called 10 minutes later. She didn't bother with hello. You are not going to leave me with a leaking roof over Christmas nonsense. This isn't about the roof. It certainly is to me. Then I'll make you an offer. She went quiet. I'll contribute toward the roof repair we originally discussed. Directly to the contractor. I will not sign a $142,000 refinance, and I will not finance a Florida condo. That is not what you promised. I promised to help with your house. You gave your word. I gave my word about shingles, Carol. Nobody mentioned palm trees. Silence. Then she said, we'll settle this Thursday at the credit union. There's nothing to settle. Mark, Tyler, you and I will sit down like adults. Then everybody can see exactly what kind of person you're being. I looked toward the kitchen. Mark was standing in the doorway. Thursday's fine. After I hung up, he said, you're going to embarrass my mother. No, I walked upstairs and pulled in a few days of clothes into the bag. Then I opened Ellie's dresser. I'm taking Ellie to Janet's for a few days. You're leaving, I'm sleeping somewhere else. Dana. I stopped and looked at him. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked scared. I wasn't ready to comfort him, and I wasn't ready to tell him our marriage was over either. The truth was, I didn't know. I need a little time where nobody explains to me why something I saw with my own eyes didn't happen. Then I zipped the bag. The credit union looked exactly like the kind of place where nobody should be having a family showdown. Gray carpet, beige walls, a fake poinsettia on the receptionist's desk. Somewhere behind the counter, a Keurig machine made a sound like it was struggling with its own personal problems. It was December 26th at 10:27 in the morning. I arrived 3 minutes early. Carol and Mark were already there. So was Tyler. Carol wore a camel-colored wool coat and the expression of a woman who believed she had summoned a meeting to correct an employee. Mark looked tired. I had spent Christmas night at my sister Janet's house in Gahanna. Ellie slept beside me in the guest room with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. I had barely slept at all. But I had made one decision. I wasn't going into that room to win an argument. I was going in to make a financial decision. That distinction mattered. The loan officer, Denise, led us into a small conference room. Can I get anyone coffee? No, thank you, I said. Carol said I'd love some. Of course she would. We sat around a rectangular table while Denise went for coffee. Carol didn't wait for her to return. She looked at Tyler. I want you to understand that none of this was necessary. Tyler glanced at me. I said nothing. Carol continued. Your father and Dana had a disagreement about Christmas and now she's dragging my home into it. She turned to me. You said you would help me. I did. And now because Renee came to Christmas, this isn't about Renee. It certainly looks that way. Tyler shifted in his chair. Carol kept going. She said I had always been uncomfortable with Mark's first family. She said I was punishing her over a scheduling misunderstanding. She mentioned the roof twice. I let her finish. That surprised her more than an argument would have. Denise returned with the coffee and sat down. She opened a folder. Okay. Before we get started, Denise, I said, would you mind telling Tyler the total amount of the proposed loan? Mark looked at me. Carol stopped stirring her coffee. Denise hesitated. She looked at Carol, then at me. Since Tyler wasn't a borrower, I realized I had put her in an awkward position. I corrected myself. Actually, never mind. Carol, would you like to tell him? Carol's lips tightened. Tyler said, tell me what I slid my copy of the loan summary toward him. He looked at the number, then looked again. 142,000, Carol said. That includes everything. Tyler frowned. I thought this was for the roof. It is. I pulled the contractor estimate from my folder. The roof estimate is 23,000 and change. Carol looked at Mark. Mark stared at the table. I went through it slowly because I didn't want this to turn into a lecture about lending. There's the existing mortgage balance, there are debts being consolidated, there are closing costs, and then there's cash coming out. Tyler looked at me. How much about 28,000? He turned to his grandmother. What's that for? Carol took a sip of coffee. Expenses. I waited. Tyler waited. Finally, I took out the printout from Naples and put it beside the loan summary. Carol's face changed, considering it. With Dana's credit, Carol stiffened. I would make the payments. Tyler looked at her for several seconds. Then he said, Grandma, you're refinancing because you're having trouble making the payments you already have. Nobody said anything. It was the simplest sentence spoken all morning, and probably the most effective. Carol turned toward me. You had no right to go through my private correspondence. I didn't. She looked at Tyler. He said, I found it in the refinance paperwork you asked me to organize. Carol went red. Mark finally spoke. Can we just calm down? I looked at him. I am calm. That seemed to irritate him more. Carol pushed the Naples pages away. This is exactly what I mean. Dana has to make everything into some investigation because she can't stand that Renee was at Christmas. Tyler shook his head. Grandma, no Tyler. Your father told us she refused to come. I turned to Mark. He closed his eyes briefly. I asked Tyler. What exactly did your dad tell you? Tyler looked uncomfortable, but he answered, that you wouldn't come if Mom was there, and that you wanted Ellie home with you. Carol pointed toward him. There. I opened my phone. I had screenshots of my messages with Mark from December 21st. One was about what wine Carol wanted. Another asked whether I should bring the folding chairs from our basement. Mark had replied, bring the chairs. Mom always runs short. The next afternoon, while they were preparing their private Christmas, he had texted, don't forget Mom likes that cranberry relish from Kroger. I put the phone on the table. If I had refused to attend, why was Mark still letting me prepare for it? Tyler read the messages. Carol looked at Mark. Mark said nothing. I asked, when did you ask Tyler to keep December 22nd free? Forgetting to tell me the time changed is handling it badly. You planned it. He had nothing left. Carol still did. She looked at me and said, this family was happier before everything became about your feelings. Before I could answer, Tyler did. Grandma Dad lied to everybody. That isn't Dana's feelings. Carol went completely still. That was the moment I had expected to enjoy. I didn't. Mostly I felt tired. Denise cleared her throat gently. We don't have to proceed today. I looked at her. I'm not proceeding. Carol turned sharply. Dana, I'm not signing the loan. You promised. I promised to help with the roof. That offer still stands. I'll contribute directly toward the necessary repair. But I'm not borrowing $142,000 with you. You're humiliating me. I looked at the Naples paperwork. Carol, I didn't bring Florida into this room. You did. She pushed back from the table. Nobody shouted. Nobody stormed out dramatically. The meeting simply ended. Sometimes that is what consequences look like. Paper goes back into a folder. A pen stays capped. A signature never appears. In the parking lot, Mark followed me to my car. Dana, I stopped. His hands were in his coat pockets. Are you leaving me? For once, I didn't have a prepared answer. I'm staying with Janet for now. That's not what I asked. I know. He looked older than he had a week earlier. What am I supposed to do? There had been a time when that question would have pulled me straight into problem-solving mode. Find the counselor, make the appointment, explain things to Carol, fix Christmas, fix him. I opened my car door. For once, Mark, figure out what you did without asking me to fix it. Still didn't get it. Not yet. She carefully folded the flap back down. Then she tucked it into the bag. We better keep it safe. I kissed the top of her head. Yeah, I said. We will. Leaving Mark did not feel the way people imagine leaving is supposed to feel. There was no dramatic music, no sudden sense of freedom. Mostly there were laundry baskets. Ellie and I spent 3 weeks in my sister Janet's guest room in Gahanna. I kept my work clothes hanging from the back of the closet door because there wasn't enough room for them anywhere else. Ellie slept in a twin bed beside me and somehow managed to occupy 3/4 of it by morning. Every weekday I drove her to preschool, drove to my office, worked all day, picked her up and drove back to Janet's. By the second week I was exhausted. By the third, I was looking at apartments. I found a 2-bedroom place in Westerville. Nothing fancy, beige carpet, small kitchen, decent school district. The living room window looked directly at another apartment building, but the dishwasher worked, and nobody there had ever asked me to co-sign anything. At 48, that counted as charm. The hardest part was Ellie. She missed her father. Children don't care who lied about Christmas or what cash-out proceeds are. They know Daddy used to read Goodnight Moon and now Daddy isn't there. One night she asked, "When are we going home?" I said, "This is home for right now." She considered that. "Daddy's home is home too." Yes. That seemed to satisfy her better than any complicated explanation I could have given. I never told her Mark was a bad father, because he wasn't. He had done a terrible thing as a father. There was a difference, and I wanted to leave room for him to understand it. To his credit, he eventually did. Not immediately. For the first month, every conversation with Mark included an explanation. His mother had pressured him. He had been embarrassed. He hadn't realized Ellie could hear him on the phone. He never intended for things to go this far. They interrupted him. She said, "Mark, do you want Dana to understand why you did it, or do you want to take responsibility for doing it?" He stopped talking. So did I. It was probably the quietest 60 seconds of our marriage. After that, something shifted. Not overnight. But slowly, Mark stopped defending himself. He started listening. A few weeks later, he asked if he could talk to Ellie with me there. We sat in my apartment living room. Mark got down on the floor beside her. "Daddy made a bad choice at Christmas." Ellie looked up from her coloring book. "You didn't invite me." "No, why?" Mark swallowed. "Because Daddy was trying to make something easier for himself, and it hurt you." Ellie thought about this. Then she asked, "Can I have the purple crayon that was Ellie?" She accepted an apology without convening a Senate hearing. I handed her the purple crayon. Mark looked at me. I could tell he wanted me to reassure him. I didn't. He needed to sit with it. Carol took longer. The refinance never happened. Tyler helped her arrange the roof repair without the Florida money attached to it. I kept my original offer and paid a portion directly to the roofing company. Some people thought I was crazy for doing even that. I didn't. I had promised to help with the roof. Keeping my word mattered to me even when other people hadn't kept theirs. Carol had to restructure some debt and cut expenses. Naples disappeared from the conversation entirely. For several months she blamed me. Her texts ranged from chilly to theatrical. One began, "I hope someday you understand what you have taken from me." I almost replied January in Florida. I didn't. Growth is often just typing something satisfying and then deleting it. I responded only when she asked about Ellie. Eventually, she asked if she could visit. I said yes, but I gave her boundaries. No criticizing me in front of Ellie. Her first visit was in late April. She arrived at my apartment carrying a small bag from Target with a stuffed bunny inside. Ellie hugged her. I made coffee. For 20 minutes, everybody behaved so politely it felt like we were attending a diplomatic summit. Then Ellie suddenly jumped up. "Grandma, wait!" She ran down the hall. Carol looked at me. I shrugged. A minute later, Ellie came back carrying a piece of red construction paper. I recognized it immediately. The Christmas card. I hadn't seen it in weeks. Apparently, she had moved it from the refrigerator at Janet's house into one of her little treasure boxes when we got the apartment. The glitter was worn off in places. One corner was bent. Ellie held it out. "I saved it for you." Carol stared at the card. "You did? You didn't get it at Christmas." Carol opened it. Inside was that same crooked green tree and 4 stick figures holding hands. Ellie, me, Mark, Carol. Carol touched the page with one finger. "You kept this all this time," Ellie nodded. "Mommy said I made it because I loved you." Carol looked at me. I said nothing. For once, neither did she. She wiped beneath one eye and looked back at Ellie. "Thank you, sweetheart." There are moments when you can make your point, and there are moments when making your point would ruin it. I let that one alone. By the following December, Mark and I were still legally married, still living separately. But we had started having dinner together once or twice a month. Sometimes Ellie came, sometimes she stayed with Janet and Mark, and I went somewhere quiet. We weren't back together. I didn't know whether we ever would be. That uncertainty used to frighten me. Eventually, it stopped. Mark had changed in ways I could actually see. He was transparent about money. He stopped automatically volunteering me whenever Carol needed something. And the first I noticed. That Christmas taught me that the worst part wasn't being left out of a dinner. It was realizing my husband had found it easier to erase his wife and daughter from the room than stand up to his mother and admit what his life really looked like. I had my own lesson to learn too. For years I thought being mature meant not making a fuss. I fixed things, paid things, smoothed things over. And little by little people started confusing my generosity with permission. My revenge, if you want to call it that, was remarkably boring. I didn't take Carol's house. I didn't empty our bank accounts. I didn't try to turn Mark's children against him. I just stopped signing my name under decisions other people made without me. You can be generous without making yourself useful to people who don't respect you, and you can forgive somebody without handing them the same pen again. If you've ever had one holiday change the way you saw your own family, then you probably understand. And if you'd like to share what it taught you, I'd be glad to hear it.